Dr. Anthony Fauci finally fessing up to what millions of us already knew. He admits his pandemic policies were draconian. But he says they were justified.
When you're dealing with a situation where the hospitals were being overrun in New York, intensive care units were being put in hallways, you have to do something that's rather draconian. And sometimes when you do draconian things, it does have deleterious consequences on the economy, on the school children. You know that. But you have to make a balance when you're dealing with
confession. Good for the soul. Dr. Fauci also blaming social media. He says users turned every piece of his pandemic guidance into a confusing and controversial statement. No, technically, the most recent White House had some hands on that one. Mercedes Schlapp, former Trump White House advisor for strategic communications. Kevin Walling, former Biden campaign surrogate. Great to see you both. Kevin, I come to you on this because it is good for the soul to confess. But the point of the matter is they had lots to look back on in a very similar situation. Much worse, 1918 Spanish flu. 50 million people died across the world. They didn't shut down the schools.
Yeah, Harris, I think, hindsight is 20/20 with all this, and I think we're still writing the history of this pandemic response. And it's good to see, Dr. Fauci out there talking about the deliberations that went on when the pandemic first hit our shores during the Trump administration, and the decisions that went in terms of shutting down the economy, shutting down the schools. You've got, I think that's the most illustrative part of his comments, specifically about school children. You've got two girls, and I know Mercy has a whole basketball team of kids, and we are still figuring out the disastrous consequences, especially for children in this country academically, when we're on pace to see the largest drop since the 1990s in terms of academics. So certainly there were decisions that went in that now seem rather wrong, and maybe we should have shut down certain parts of the economy, certain states based on what we were seeing, but we were losing tens of thousands of Americans every single day in the height of that COVID crisis.
Mercedes, the point of the Spanish flu, of course, was that children were not in large numbers among those, reportedly. And also the learning gap that you're talking about, it will take generations to recover from that. And again, children were not in harm's way as much as people in their 80s with COVID.
That's right. Well, I think what's so disturbing about Dr. Fauci's comments is that he now is admitting that there were these issues with basically the decisions that he made. I mean, it was a lot of these unelected bureaucrats basically making these unilateral decisions, not necessarily consulting with the economic teams of the White House and the Trump administration to find that balance. And so what was troubling for me is that Fauci really spent a lot of time, instead of saying, I don't know, we don't know the long-term consequences when this was happening, back in 2020 and 2021, it was that he thought that his answer was the only right answer. And so I think that's the troubling part of this. I think that looking back, there should have been a balance in terms of what should have been shut down or not shut down. You saw in these states like Florida and Texas where they stayed open, where they tried to get the children back to school, it ended up with a better result than a lot of these other states. And really, it was because of President Trump and his ability to get Operation Warp Speed going and functioning that really made the difference, and his coordination with these governors in these different states.
All right. I don't know if you saw it, but the president declared that COVID is over. And the White House press secretary went on the defense for him, saying that he meant the car show, the pandemic was over at the car show because people were not wearing masks. Kevin.
Well, Harris, I mean, we can look around. It seems like for the vast majority of Americans, especially those that are now getting this fourth booster, that the pandemic phase of this crisis is over.
Well, then let me ask you this. Can we get some of that taxpayer money back that Democrats say that they want to keep spending on COVID? Because if it's officially over, first of all, they needed to make an announcement more so than at a car show. That's a little shocking. Mercedes?
I agree. I think, look, there's mixed messages when it comes to the Biden administration on this topic. You know what's coming up, Harris? It's called the midterm elections. And they want to be able to say the pandemic is over. Let's focus on other things. And I think for the Democrats, they're, again, misplaying their hand. You know, for a lot of Americans, this pandemic has been over for a long time. But this administration has taken a long time to acknowledge that.
All right. Good to see you both. Kevin, Mercedes, thank you.
Good to see you, Harris. Thanks.
Disgraced news.